Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to WCS European Challenger here at the Blizzard Esports Arena. We are getting ready to hop into our second series of the day. My name is PtitDrogo, and I am now joined by the Zerg expert himself. Kat, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Ravi. How are you?
I'm doing quite fantastic, as it seems as though we are going to be moving into our Zerg versus Protoss next. And actually, if we take a look at that group, we'll see that this is going to be this sort of interesting point where now Drogo has been able to prepare for primarily just Zerg. This is all he's had to worry about. So I feel like in a lot of ways he's going to be the best prepared, whereas Bly, it's not as useful for him to prepare for Protoss outside of the fact that he most likely knows Serral's going to be a hard one to beat. I need to beat Drogo to advance out of this group most likely.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I talked to Drogo actually just yesterday. He said he's been preparing a lot for this group. He's feeling semi-confident against Bly. He feels like he could get mind-gamed and lose, and that's kind of the story of Bly himself, right? I also asked Bly what his thoughts are. He said he could either win or lose, so that was helpful.
It sounds like both of them basically said they could either win or lose, which is a good identification of the rules for a competitive tournament.
It sure is, but it also speaks to, you know, how they view each other as opponents. I think that it is a volatile matchup between the two of them. I think that either one of them could take it.
Yeah, and it's sort of cool, too, because I feel like both of these players are sitting in a pretty similar place, where both of them have seen success in the past. They've had points in time where a lot of people would say, oh, you know, they're on the up and up, or they're one of the contenders for doing very, very well in one of these events. But they kind of have gone up and down over the years. They've had some like highs, some lows, and I feel like at the end of the day, they're both sitting in sort of the same spot where they're trying to reclaim a bit of that glory from their former days.
Absolutely, and there's little breaks in StarCraft. As a professional gamer, there's not a lot of breathing room to just, you know, say, I'm going to take a few months off, right? There's always tournaments, so you kind of have to pick and choose your battles as far as tournaments go. So Bly was telling me he's actually not been playing as much recently. He plans to ramp it up for DreamHack Austin, whereas Drogo feels like he's been preparing a lot for this in particular. So if anything, I would slightly favor Drogo. It just felt like he was a little bit more confident, but yeah.
Yeah, it's also interesting that you say that, because I almost feel as though Bly's playstyle, for those who are not familiar with it, he's a very cheesy player is what a lot of people like to say. He is a player that gets in your head a lot, specifically, is what I would say. And I feel as though that sort of style requires a lot of preparation, requires a lot of work on having particular builds and knowing specific timing. So if you're not playing as much, I feel like it's a harder style to execute.
He's a smart guy, and I think that if he can take people to his comfort zone, like for example, he likes doing things like proxy hatching, right? But one thing that will work against him, I think, is the recent nerf to Overlords dropping. That was a big problem for Protoss and a big strength for Bly. So I feel like we might see a different side of Bly, and if we're not seeing proxy hatch, I would anticipate we'll see a longer macro game.
Yeah, and that's the kind of funny thing, is that Bly is known for doing these cheeses, but he still does have some pretty good macro. And I feel like Drogo also, a player that is fully capable of mixing it up between the macro and also throwing out a lot of those like 2-base all-ins, 7-gated depths, etc. He's been pretty good at both of those, I would say.
Absolutely. What I'm most concerned about for Drogo here is he can be an emotional player, a tilty player. I think that if he loses this match, he's got to be at great risk of not advancing through the group. And
especially versus a player like Bly. That's one of the big strengths of his playstyle, is that he is a player that will put players on tilt with the way he plays.
Not just with the way he plays. Like, he'll do everything he can to put players on tilt. That's just Bly. His competitive nature and spirit transcend the game. There's some stories about Bly where, for example, if a player was in a lobby and they started the game as soon as Bly joined, he would just leave the game and say, I didn't say go. So, you know, just to tilt their opponent. And I mean, it's, you know, it's fair. Yeah, that's Bly. He's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, getting every single competitive edge possible, and maybe also part of his tactics right now, as I think we're getting ready to hop into that series, ladies and gentlemen, but we are just waiting on Bly, who maybe just saying, you know what, I've been allotted X amount of time before I will be DQ'd. I'm going to make my opponent wait there in suspense. Next level mind games. No,
Next level.
Yeah. Should be a fun one, though. And, of course, remember that the winner of this series is going to be facing off versus Serral in the winner's match. Loser is going to go down to face off versus Starbuck in that loser's match.
Yeah, I mean, whoever goes up against Serral is going to have a mountain to climb. I think that's just the way things are with Serral in the mix. Whoever goes up against Starbuck has the match, you know, that they don't want to lose for sure.
Yeah.
But I would say these players are capable of beating Serral on a good day.
Yeah. What do you kind of expect from Drogo? Because I know you talked about how he's sort of sometimes a little bit more of a tilty player. I've seen a good variety of stuff from Drogo, and I feel like Protoss players are in a weird and sort of interesting spot where they've been able to experiment a little bit away from just the Stargate openings and whatnot. But it's been weird because Protoss players, they've been able to go for a lot more of the Archon drops and all these things since the balance change, but I feel like a lot of Protoss players are still just opening up at Stargate regardless.
It's just a safe opener still, and it provides you with a lot of information, a lot of scouting. So it's just something that I feel like Protoss players got used to, and now just it's become the norm to an extent, right?
Yeah, makes sense. And of course, with that being said, it looks like we finally have that game invite. We're going to be hopping on to Acid Plants for game number 1. Should be a fun one. And again, Drogo versus Bly.
Indeed. Yeah, so we're just waiting for the invites here. To touch on your point, I think that Stargate openers, in the past or before the patch, you would have to open with Phoenix just to prevent the Overlord from dropping, right?
Yeah.
So now you can go straight into Oracles, and that's a little bit of a stronger start for Protoss, right? Like the potential to do a little bit more damage right away. So that's one change that is in favor of Protoss even within the Stargate tech tree.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of Protoss players kind of utilize that. We've also seen some Protoss players do some pretty cheeky things, like going for the double Warp Prism quadruple, sorry, 4 Archon? Quadruple? Yeah, quad is 4. Quad is 4.
Quad is 4 indeed. I would most certainly agree with that. And yeah, I think that requires a lot. I mean, even top Korean players will botch it from time to time, right? Like that's just really difficult.
There was actually, was a match from, well, yes. There was a very, very fun match in the GSL where we saw that happen. With also, I think my favorite part was the shield batteries that he made. He went over to his opponent's gold base, brought a probe, built 2 shield batteries to keep the Archons alive and heal him up, and then proceeded to lose his first Archon because he was trying to micro 4 Archons and 2 Warp Prisms, and
that is a lot.
It's not simple.
Yeah, and then you have to power those with the Warp Prism as well. That's an extra few steps actually to go. So yeah, it is a difficult opener, but I wouldn't be surprised to see someone like Drogo do it.
Okay, well, game is getting ready. Bly versus Drogo. We've been talking a lot about this match and how this is going to likely be one of the most important matches of the group to determine who is going to be most likely to make it out of the group. But we're going to be starting down in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, top of the blue Zerg player.
Oh, Drogo with the Blight tactics.
Sun. Is it like glare from the sun?
I mean, I guess. The sun is, yeah, a little bit generic of an explanation, but...
Yeah. Did you know my name means sun?
Really?
Yeah. I always like to think it was like a pun on the word S-O-N, sun. It's like, oh, you're my son.
I don't know what my name means, man. But you are my son, Ravi.
Oh, well, thank you. But that's also a little weird. I think you're not that much older than me.
You're my son.
Yeah, you're not that much older than me. That'd be pretty weird.
All right. It seems like the game has resumed.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we can stop filling time as we start down in the bottom right. We have our blue Zerg player. It's Bly.
Sunlighting his room was the issue, so I'm guessing he shut the curtains close, perhaps.
Like a vampire.
And we'll see if he can do the same in the match. Starting at the top left hand of the side of the map, it's PtitDrogo. Theo Fredria.
Oh, okay. It's so weird how I feel like it's just a unanimous thing that players and gamers just like staying up late, and they hate the sun. They like staying inside a lot of the time. There are definitely some exceptions. I've seen some people who like playing and keeping good hours. They get up early, but I feel as though most of these players, Drogo definitely included, like to just play in the darkness.
Oh, I hate the sun, man. I'm with you there. That's for sure. It's so difficult to face the sun, you know?
Yeah, causes a lot of glare, man.
It really
Makes
does.
sense.
It really does. But on your monitor, that's especially bad. So I can understand where Drogo's coming from here for sure.
Okay. Well, oh, this is interesting. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but interesting position for the spawning pool.
Very interesting. I'm actually very curious as to what the reasoning could be for this. I can't think of anything.
I've been thinking about this a while, and I've always wondered about this. With a lot of the things like War Prism Archon drops, especially since they're kind of making a big comeback in the matchup these days, I've always thought if you have that spawning pool behind the mineral line, as a lot of Zerg players will like to do it, you're kind of also cutting or giving your opponent an opportunity to do more harassment and have less surface area for your Lings to actually.
That is an excellent point, Ravi. I completely agree with that, and I think that might very well be the reason why we're seeing the pool here, actually. Very good.
Okay.
Love it.
Start incorporating it in your game, man.
I might have to.
Of course, the downside is that it's also a very vulnerable spawning pool later on if the Archons ever, or like a couple of Zells ever get warped in. We also got this one probe just patrolling. I think that Drogo likely just keeping an eye out for the drone looking to become a third base, but he sees the Lings and is going to have to back up.
Indeed he will. And we will have a Stargate opening, so yeah, nothing out of the ordinary from Drogo either. The Lings will chase away the probe and Bly will be allowed to take his third hatchery.
Yeah, also I was wondering for a moment, if he only sees 2 Lings, I think you might know this. If there are only 2 Lings out, can you block that hatchery with a pylon and the Lings won't kill it off in time?
Sure, yeah, you could do that. That would have been something to do, but I mean, they will kill it off right after it's done. Or...
It's just a minor delay. Okay. Well, Drogo waiting to get that wall in, and this is sort of important to note. He doesn't complete the wall in with the Stargate, as some Protoss players used to do, just because it got to a point in the meta where everyone just knew you were going for Stargate. So what was the point in hiding it? Just put it at the wall, get the complete wall off, and kind of help yourself out versus a lot of those Zerg all-ins.
Yeah, that is absolutely the reason people put it at the front. In fact, I'm kind of surprised he didn't do it against Bly, of all people. But like I said, I think that Zergs have kind of transitioned out of all linie plays since the Overlord nerf. So I think that we're looking at a macro game, most likely, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a Muta switch from Bly later on. He's just been favoring that style.
Oh, really? Interesting. The Muta switches are so weird to see sometimes, because you have the Protoss players who are always open up with Stargate, so they have that Stargate ready, but it still catches them so off guard because they will oftentimes only have like a single Phoenix, and sometimes they even lose that Phoenix.
Yeah, and Zerg players are very hesitant to go into Muta because of that of the Stargate opening. It seems counterintuitive, and that's kind of the bread and butter of Bly. He will exploit anything that he can as far as he can get an edge. Mind games are his game.
Okay, well, we do have Spore Crawler coming on down. We got our lair coming up. We got a Baneling Nest. So far, no Roach Horn or anything. The Baneling Nest can be an answer to things like Resonating Glaives attacks, as we have that Twilight Council on the Robo coming out. But we'll see if that's going to actually be what he's up against, and if he's going to need those.
Definitely. Well-positioned Queens will shut this down. Very nice from PtitDrogo, by the way, to bring the Phoenix with the Oracle. So if there was only 2 Queens at a base, he could have actually sniped a lot of drones, but Bly had 3 Queens. Very well done.
Okay. We got more gateways being added on. We're going straight up into a Templar Archive. So pretty quick tech up here. Drogo just saying, I'm going to get up my Templar Archives, get up charge, and delay my third by a good bit. Oh man, has Bly seen? Okay, Bly's going to move in with the Zergling. Now he definitely knows for certain there is no third base here.
Yeah, it's a fast tech tree for Drogo, but he's still going to be looking at playing a macro game most likely. He might have a timing to hit with the Cello charge, but I don't think that's going to be the case. We don't see... How many gateways do we have on?
I think he has 6. Yes.
Okay, so I guess he can do something. He's definitely going to start off with this Archon play and maybe warp in 6 Celots in the main alongside it.
Yeah, just the double Archon allows you to put on some good pressure. Looks like we're getting a pause out from Bly, because you know what? He got to even things up. The repeat rate, apparently, is low for some reason.
Yeah.
Man, I love the pause tag. You know, okay, controversial opinion here, all right? I have thought it's always very interesting how you have things like pauses or like timeouts in a lot of like normal professional sports and stuff. And I've always thought, what if in StarCraft you could say, during any point in the game, I could just pause. I could just ask for a pause. It's not because I have like some malfunction or something, just I want 3 minutes to cool my head.
Yeah, I mean, most tournaments will kind of allow for that, right? It's just in the GSL, I think, that you would have to have a problem in order to pause, but a lot of other tournaments, we can't tell if they're having a problem or not. So, you know, we've had both players pause in this game. Yeah, it could just be to tilt each other, honestly.
That would be so great.
And we're going to have at the same time, I'm surprised Drogo's not already moving with the Zealots. He will move in with the Zealots at the same time and go for the third of Bly. So he's going to be trying to force Bly to react on two fronts.
Oh, Warp Prism getting pretty low. The Queens almost get the pick off over there, but now the Warp Prism's too low to pick up any of the Archons, so all of them are going to die. The Hydras take care of all of that. The Zealots go ham at that third base, though. We have 12 workers killed. Blying down at 43 workers. Never a good spot for a Zerg player.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the real attack, right? You do things on two fronts, and you hope that that's enough. And it's very difficult to stop this kind of attack without roaches, by the way. And Banelings are actually going to suffer as well against this sort of two-pronged attack because you want clumps of units to hit with your Banelings. So if you have two prongs coming in, then, you know, there's less units to hit on either front.
Okay, well, the two-prong attack is pretty successful. He almost snipes off that hatchery. He was two Zealot attacks away from killing it off, but he might be able to even going in with the Oracle or something. Oh no, he ended up losing the Oracle later on during that attack, but it still is going to be a big target for later. The Warp is still alive.
Yeah, Drogo's got to be well aware of the health of that hatchery, and so is Bly. So Bly might look to try to save some transfuse energy, perhaps. But yeah, Drogo's going to be looking for that.
I mean, Bly, I feel like he feels like he's been forced into an all-in position. He's moving in with the Hydras, trying to get some damage on. He does pick off one of the Archons, picking off the Zealots pretty quickly as well. The shield batteries are going to be very important to try and keep these Archons alive, but the Hydra DPS is just a little bit too high, and Bly may be able to do some equalizing damage here. It's going to rely on those reinforcing warpins here.
Yeah, very good kiting by Drogo, just moving back with the Immortal after each shot. But he's kind of overextending with the Zealots. I feel like he could have fought with his shield batteries the entire time. When he moved in with those first three Zealots, the Archons and the Immortals weren't doing damage. And now, like you said, Bly is going to go into the natural base where there's no shield batteries, even though the shield batteries were nearly depleted at the third. And this is a lot of damage.
Yeah, this is already some pretty substantial damage as the Hydras and Lings start making their way over to the main base. Now, Drogo has had some time to warp in some more units, to get up an Archon, get up a few more Zealots. He's still losing a lot of valuable units, might even lose another Immortal here. No, the Hydras... Oh, did they right-click on the pilot? No, they're trying to go behind the mineral line.
Yeah, but the SimCity of Drogo is going to make it so that there's a long way to get there. At the same time, Bly trying his own tactics, trying to separate the attention of Drogo, but of course Protoss has the ability to warp in units, so it's a little bit easier to deal with multi-pronged attacks, provided that you have enough gateways.
Yeah, but that third base has been able to survive this whole time. It's regenerating the hit points slowly but surely, but he's also just keeping Drogo on the defensive. I think the big problem is that Bly has done some light amounts of worker damage, but for the most part, Drogo has kind of gotten away with his existing economy, and Bly hasn't been investing more into his own, so he is on a bit of a timer.
That is exactly the point that I was going to make. The problem for Bly is that he made those Hydras and Banelings that we now see moving forward on the map because he was maybe expecting for his army at Drogo's to survive for a little bit longer to be reinforced. If he was trying to reinforce an army, I would have liked to see, I would have liked to have seen circling reinforcements. But yeah, this army is gonna get crushed, and with that, I think that Drogo takes a substantial lead in the game. So I think that Bly had an opportunity after doing so much damage to say, okay, this is where I start droning. Instead, he decided, I'm gonna supplement my attack. But the problem is he went for more economical damage and he ran his Hydras into the main, so those Hydras were always going to die.
And yeah, even the Hydras on the counterattack over by the third get cleaned up. The rest of the army gets cleaned up. And like you said, Drogo starting to claim a bit of that supply advantage. And remember, he also just has better tech units. He's got Warp Prisms, he's got Archons, he's got Immortals. So having a higher supply on top of all of that and also having more workers is really going to start hurting Bly's position. And he's even starting to get mined out of his main base. He's in a really, really rough spot right now.
Yeah, and I gotta stress how much I love this call by PtitDrogo. He's not overextending. He's not gonna run into Bly. He just pulls his army back after forcing more units out of Bly. So he moves halfway to the map or through the map potentially threatening the third of Bly with an army that could actually maybe take that third and potentially end the game. But instead he says, you know what, I know how much damage I did earlier. For you to have that many units to have attacked me, you weren't making drones. For the follow-up, you weren't making drones. I'm ahead. There's no reason for me to attack right now.
Yeah, there is going to be that Spire you were talking about, though, coming out. And while there are Archons are kind of they're a good answer to Mutalisks if they're coming out in large or small or large numbers, and they're directly trying to engage versus the Protoss army. But if you don't really have a large number of Phoenix, or you don't even at least have Blink Stalkers or something, you can get sort of pulled apart if you stay too defensive. So I wonder if that's what Bly is going to try and exploit. Right now, though, he's going to be losing a lot of Hydras on this retreat.
Yeah, Bly is definitely still thinking about this game and is still trying to win this game. I don't think he gauges just how far behind he is. I don't think this game is very winnable for Bly. Now it's, yeah, close to unwinnable. So what I would have done is hide the fact that I like going for Mutas, not give my opponent instant practice on what I'm going to do potentially for the rest of the series, right? So instead I would have tried something weird like swarm hosts or some tech that just puts thoughts in the head of my opponent for the next games. That there's a potential for me to do that.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really interesting and good point, is just the idea of preparing for game number 2 through what you're doing in game number 1. If you're falling behind, you just use it as an opportunity to try and make your opponent feel.
And he GG's before the Muta, so he didn't reveal the Muta at the end. So I don't mind it that much. Yeah. You know, I just don't like giving any of my hand away, and I think he did a good job of that by GGing when he did.
Yeah, Bly, of course, pretty experienced with this. Although Bly, I think, is also, it's funny enough that even though that's the case, Bly is also, weirdly enough, one of the type of players who does stick around in games until he's down to like 1/4 the supply of his opponent or something. So I'm glad that he was able to get out of that before he did reveal his kind of critical tech there.
Yeah, if it wasn't a best of 3, I absolutely would stick.
Yeah,
all the way through. That's kind of my jam too.
Okay, well, that does, again, put Drogo up 1-0, and that's going to be a really comfortable spot, I think, for him, because Bly is one of those players that you never want to be at the point where you're about to potentially lose a series. If it's a best of 3, you never want to be down 0-1. If it's a best of 5, you never want to be down 0-2 versus Bly, because he's just the player that busts out craziness and will catch you by surprise and kind of sneak in a game victory.
Absolutely, and I would have loved to see that craziness shown in the first game, because again, like the mind games, just getting into the head of your opponent, just putting options in the head of your opponent where they have to think about more things to deal with in the upcoming games is really important. But obviously, that if you do that every time, then you become predictable.
Yeah. Okay, well, with that being said, Drogo, he had a pretty successful opening there, and it was going a lot down to the kind of two-prong attack you were talking about, where it wasn't even necessarily just about, oh, he's able to get some damage done on that hatchery and stuff. He killed off 12 workers there. That put him substantially far ahead enough that Bly was kind of forced into a position where he had to go for these crazy attacks that were basically all in.
And you look at it and you might think, whoa, that's kind of crazy, but man, it worked, right? The first attack worked. So the problem for Bly was the follow-up. The problem for Bly was that he didn't drone up behind it, and he didn't fully commit to the attack. So if he was going to try to win with that attack, I would have rather seen Zerglings to reinforce, because they're going to get there much faster and potentially contribute to the fight at hand. But instead, he went for a next wave of Hydras. And that just kind of set him far behind, right? Because he did economical damage, but just to even things out, and he didn't really take advantage of that window.
Yeah, how did you also feel about like the Hydra run by? Just going straight into the natural, then running up to the main base?
I like the decision to go into the natural. There weren't shield batteries there. I would have liked to see him try to take maybe the Cyber Core down or something like that, just at the front. But I didn't mind him going into the prop line off the natural. I did not like him going into the main. That's just a lot more time that you're going to have to... Like, he went into the natural to avoid the shield batteries, which, by the way, were almost depleted. And there's more workers at the natural than at the third, right? Because that's the base you saturate first. But going into the main, that's just a lot of travel distance for Hydras, which are really slow units. So that gives PtitDrogo a little bit more time to warp in units. And he had a beautiful SimCity, so the Hydras had to go all the way around. Yeah, so it's difficult to tell, because if there's not that SimCity, then the travel distance for the Hydras is even like half of that, right? So then maybe you get more economical damage. But economical damage wasn't too consistent with what he was trying ultimately.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Well, we are going to be starting in the bottom right, top of the blue Zerg player. It's Bly.
And top left, the Protoss player, it's PtitDrogo. Little Drogo.
Little Drogo. I know he's had a lot of complaints about how people say his name in the past.
You mean his real name?
No.
Oh, that's
PtitDrogo.
good, because I'm sure I botched that one. I'll try again. Theophilia!
Yeah, I think that's one of those names that you only really say the first name. You're like, I know
My
your
boy
last name.
Theo, yeah.
My boy Theo. Well, okay. Backwater is a fun map because you get that easy third base as a Protoss player and a Zerg player. So in a lot of ways it can be nice, but this is also a really nice map for that kind of Warp Prism harassment, the Oracle harassment, etc. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Drogo go for a pretty similar kind of opening.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you touched on it. It's kind of a Protoss map in my opinion because you have access to 3 bases, and that's where the Zerg can usually threaten to cancel your third, whereas the third base for the Zerg is a lot easier to take, generally speaking. It's a lot because you use the hatchery for production, because the hatchery is a little bit cheaper. You need that third hatchery, whereas the Protoss player is kind of greedy in taking a third Nexus because you can only use it for pro production, right? So on this map, you can wall off, and then the wall off negates all of that surface area, which Lynx rely on, Banelings to an extent rely on. Even Roaches have pretty short attack range, so yeah, you wall that off, you can take an easy third. You can even mind game and not take that third potentially, right? So I like this map for Drogo, and especially against someone like Bly that likes mixing in that aggression. I think that it's going to be tough for him.
Okay, Adept shades forward, trying to use that that brush to evade the Zerglings a little bit, but ends up moving back in. Gonna go after a drone. He might actually be able to get one. Ooh, oh, nice dodge.
Well done.
Last second there.
Yeah, Drogo actually missing one shot there. Could have actually killed the drone. I think he hit a Zergling, or the animation just didn't go through.
Yeah, getting close. I mean, it's nice when you can kill off a couple of those drones or a Ling here and there, but a lot of it, I think, is just trying to go for that scout, confirm that your opponent is making a couple of Lings. You get a scout out on that third base as well, which is pretty important.
And you know what? Yeah, Drogo got away with only making 2 Adepts here, and Bly made 10 Zerglings to answer the first Adept, which survives. So it's a win for Drogo, I would say.
And now there's a Phoenix out, which is sitting, chilling, pretty over here. Finally gonna find that Overlord as it waits for that Oracle to pop out. And then, like you said in the last game, the Phoenix can pair up with that Oracle, can lift up one of the Queens, and Oracle can kind of just try and get a bit more damage done.
Yeah, see, I don't like this as much because the Phoenix kind of just sits idly, and then the Oracle stands a lesser chance to do damage because there's going to be, you know, spores in place. Now, if you're going to make a Phoenix anyway, I think that making the Phoenix first makes some sense because you get the energy, the extra energy to work with, but the Oracle is also an energy unit, so I don't know. Without the Overlord drops, I don't really like the first Phoenix openers as much as before.
Yeah, I feel like usually it's the Oracle that's also more limited by the energy. The Phoenix occasionally does get limited by the energy. You're out of energy to do the lift-ups, but usually I think you end up being pretty okay. Oh, that's a nice snipe off on one of the Overlords. It means with energy to transfuse, not quite here.
Yeah, the Oracle's in the main base. And how many kills did it get, Ravi?
2 kills? 3 kills?
3.
Okay. That's not too bad.
No, I've seen worse.
Yeah.
And again, even if you make the Oracle first and the spores are ready earlier, that's economy denied, right? Because those spores were drones, and that's an investment that you don't want to make early rather than later. So again, I feel like this Phoenix first openers are kind of just the transition from the Overlord drops. We saw, for example, Bly make 10 Zerglings. Usually those Zerglings would be a threat, right? Usually those Zerglings could potentially be dropped in your opponent's base. Then you have to prepare, then you have to make something like a Phoenix for safety. But in this position, I'm not so much. That's a lot of gateway.
Yeah, that kind of flood of production that comes out from a Protoss player who goes for the third base before really throwing down a whole lot of their tech. It's already finished up. I mean, you compare this to the last game, Drogo's third went down about 20-30 seconds ago. In this game, his Nexus is fully operational and nearly fully saturated at this point. Only like 30 seconds later than when he had started at the last game.
I'm a Zerg player, Ravi. This is nasty. I mean, he's getting away with so much this game, Drogo that is. And that is just the nature of this map. You can wall off the ramp and be at a very low risk to lose to anything, really. I feel like this map Before the patch, there's a little bit more threat with the Overlord drops. Now it's just, it's kind of a nightmare. So we're going to see a huge attack here by Drogo, and it's not going to be even fully committed. +1 and charge are finishing.
Okay, War Prism also loaded up with the 2 Archons. Oh, the Ling does spot it out, and I also want to know that there are a lot of Hydras that are just sitting over by the main base. No, he's going to retreat with the Hydras, move them to over by the 4th base, maybe?
And I think that's a great call by Bly, because he anticipates since he spotted the War Prism, his opponent wouldn't be so silly as to go into the main, especially after warping in some Zealots, right? Because they don't all fit in the War Prism.
War Prism getting a little bit low on hit points, but the Hydra's not quite able to catch up with it as it goes over cliffs and utilizes that air superiority I guess it has. Revelation also thrown down on top of some of these Hydras, so he'll know if Bly decides to continue pushing across the map or not. But there's a decent number of Zealots out. They have charge, like you said before, and even the first Immortal is out, so he should be okay versus a light push. But if this gets reinforced, this could get a bit dicey.
Yeah, I would love to see a transition out of Immortals into a different Robo unit, that'd be Disruptors or Colossi, just because the composition that Bly is favoring doesn't include Roaches at this point in time, and he scouted very early Hydralisks. But Bly is actually heading into the very quick Spire, and this is incredibly... Oh, man. I'm not even sure. Did he cancel the Spire?
No, he still has that Spire. He's starting up 9 Mutas, so he's going to start with the Spire, maybe try and force out a lot more Archons, and like you said, maybe try and get the Immortal production to halt, which I think already, I mean, this is not necessarily a signal he's thinking about stopping Immortal production entirely, but he's going for the Observer right now, not really making any more Immortals, and this could end up backfiring on him.
Yeah, it's Switch City for Bly from here on. He's going to go for the 9 Mutas. He's going to try to take care of this War Prism probably, then apply some pressure, force out some Phoenixes, and then go into Lurkers with the Hydralisks, it seems. I really like it, but he's not going to have enough units throughout, and PtitDrogo identifies this. I think this is a kill move.
Oh my god, these Zealots are going to be so difficult to deal with. +1 weapon Zealots shred through the Lings. The Mutas on the other side of the map trying to get some damage done. Photon Cannons finishing
Wow.
up. I mean, only one of them's going to be here. There's a lot of pylons, but not a lot of defensive measures.
No matter what, this buys him a lot of time, and man, when you just made 9 Mutas and you're switching into Lurkers, oh my god, he's somehow stopping this, it seems.
Okay, the Stalkers are trying to delay these Mutas. The Mutas have not been able to get that much damage in because they're fighting directly versus the Stalkers.
Oh,
Zealot's getting shut down in the main base, and the rest of the army does kill off the 4th base, but he loses a decent chunk of it in the process.
Yeah, those warpins forced by the Muta were a lot to deal with. I think that at that point in time, PtitDrogo could have just chosen or tried to end the game potentially, but maybe he feels better going into a longer game.
Oh, this is such a weird spot now, because the Mutas did kill off a decent number of workers, 17, but Drogo killed off 34 workers during all of this, Cats. This is also pretty substantial amount of damage on his side, and the Hydras, I feel like they are the big playmaker here, because Drogo lost a lot of army supply, and if Bly can maybe continue the pressure, no, he's going to back up and make drones.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see Bly switch back into Muta, but I think he's just going to make some Lurkers, and at this point just try to sit back. If he's making drones, he's not looking for a kill move here. So maybe, I don't know, I would like to see something like Lurker drops to harass, right? You have to kind of switch your mindset as the game progresses. You might have had something in mind. I think that he was looking to keep Drogo in his base with the Mutalisks, right? That's something that Mutalisks do very well. They give you map control. And then advance with the Lurkers, which are very positional units onto the map. But with PtitDrogo out on the map like this, Ravi, it's going to be incredibly hard to move those Lurkers forward. So now he has to maybe think about a defensive position, and that's why I like the droning here.
Yeah, and that does make a lot of sense, but then remember that Robo being very inactive. There's still the 4 Immortals out right now, but Drogo is prioritizing making a lot more.
And Bly is moving out onto the map regardless, so he gets some position out here in the middle.
Lurkers have also been confirmed. The War Prism going to be making its way over to that 3rd base. There's only a Spore Crawler here, and the Spires here as well if Bly ever wants to switch back into that. But 4 Zealots going to be wreaking some havoc, maybe forcing... Oh, Bly, he's pulling back to his bottom base, expecting the attack to come from there, but... I think that it's actually just going to go straight over down the center.
Yeah, he sees it with a creep now, so he will reposition. Again, Lurkers are very positional units, so he has to kind of pick his spot and then siege.
War Prism does get forced back eventually. Bly manages to push that back, but okay, Lurkers trying to reposition over by that 4th base, 5th base. is going to be able to scare Drogo off for now. Drogo really doesn't want to engage into these kind of choke points versus the Lurkers, even with Immortals.
Exactly. Choke points are the Lurkers' bread and butter.
Oh, Fleet Beacon getting started up. Okay, so Drogo thinking about that transition point at this stage. So he says, okay, it's going to be hard to break this. If he finds an opportunity, he's going to keep poking and prodding. But if he doesn't find an opportunity, he's got that next transition set up.
Exactly, and that's a great move as well, right? Identifying pretty much everything that we've been talking about, saying, okay, Bly, you kind of have to be defensive at this point because, you know, of what we mentioned, he's using the Lurkers defensively. Drogo has a position out on the map, and with that position, he's going to say, okay, maybe it's my time to transition. But as we say that, Drogo's actually moving back in order to claim his fourth from this Hydras. This will allow Bly, if he wants to take this opportunity to move forward, to gain some position back on the map with the Lurkers and threaten Drogo. So we'll see. There's a mothership on the way, so maybe that's the tech that he's looking for. Maybe he's still looking for a kill move.
Yeah, this is still going to allow him to put on continued pressure, and I like that he's got these Zealots just sitting here and waiting for the moment that his army makes his way close enough to the front door of Bly so that he can come charging on forward, no pun intended, on the other side by that 5th base. He's just waiting for that opportunity. He knows that he's revealed his army. He's trying to move forward. The Zealots are going to start making their way forward. The Hydras and the Mutas just barely out of position. There is a Lurker there to help defend, though.
Yeah, but a Lurker's not going to be enough. The Lurkers ultimately get caught off position now, and the Storms are going to be so powerful. The Immortals are going to get some shots off potentially in these Lurkers before they burrow, and this is just going to be very difficult for Bly to respond to. Again, you want those Lurkers sieged where the army is going to come in from.
Okay, and the Lurker Den actually getting a hit over here by the Archons. He might even be able to recall out of here, maybe?
He doesn't need to. I think he can just kill these Lurkers.
Oh my god, yeah, he's got the Immortal count. Immortals are starting to fall now that the Hardened Shields are gone, but he's done more than enough damage. The Lurker count has been devastated. That base on the bottom side was also taken out, and we end up seeing that Drogo is just climbing up further and further ahead in supply. He was already sitting up 1-0, so this could be, like you said, not only the kill move for the game, but potentially a kill move for the series.
Yeah, and behind this, he's transitioning. So this could have been the end of the game if Drogo had leaned on the aggression, but instead he said, I might do some damage with this, I may not do some damage with this, right?
He's transitioning, but he's transitioning into carriers, Cats, and I don't know that he has time to get out carriers with this number of Mutas out.
I think it should be okay.
Okay, I mean, he's trying to make an Archon right now, but he doesn't have any anti-air. There are
the Archon actually gets picked off.
Yeah, there's only 6 Stalkers. The Mothership is going to make its way out, and there's no Overseer here, so that might be a saving grace, but the Mothership is going to be saving time by losing its life.
Yeah, these Stalkers actually don't have Blink either, but I think this will be dealt with. But will it do enough damage to bring Bly back into the game? I mean, he's still working on 3 base. Now the carriers come out and they will have some interceptors to work with.
Yeah, he did snipe off the 5th base of Drogo, so there's some advantages that come from that. But like you said, he's still going to be on a worse economy. He's trying to take care of the interceptors as fast as they pop out. If he can take enough of them out.
There's a lot of Stalkers now.
Yeah, there's like a hope that he would be able to do something, but it's not just Stalkers. It's also +3 weapon Stalkers versus not super well upgraded Hydras or Mutas.
Yeah, and Drogo's now getting the Pulse Crystals for the Phoenixes, as well as a few Phoenixes. Just mixing them in, seeing as Bly is super committed to the Mutas. Yeah, so that's a great move by him.
Yeah, that range upgrade that allows those Phoenix to outrange the Mutas by just a little bit more, allow them to out-micro them and kill theoretical infinite number of Mutas. It ends up working out pretty well once you get up even just a handful of those Phoenix. But okay, here comes the big death push. I think that Bly's game here is probably just to try and turn this into some weird base trade.
Yeah, I mean, Bly is double expanding right now. I like the idea, but it seems like Drogo's looking to punish anything that that Bly is willing to do here. The Muta will go for the counter-offensive, and Drogo's actually splitting his army, so he might recall some Stalkers. We see some Stalkers split out to the side of the map in view of that watchtower by Bly, but no, he's just going to push on forward. And yeah, like you said, I mean, we're looking at somewhat of a base trade.
Okay, now Mutas,
supplies are even, actually.
Yeah, Mutas in a base trade are surprisingly good. They are, in a lot of ways, kind of more ideal than the composition that Drogo has right now, which is a very immobile army. He can protect individual buildings, and he's doing a good job of taking out a lot of Bly's drones, but Bly escapes with a handful of them, and he's getting a good amount of damage done to most of the bases. The problem is he didn't really kill off the actual Nexus, if he can shut down any probes from escaping, though, that would be huge.
Yeah, these Hydras are a huge threat right now, and Bly is continuing to reinforce. So these Hydras are going to deal with the ground army and the Phoenix, potentially, and that's how the Mutas do their stuff. But no, the probes are pulled, and that will be enough to deal with the Hydras. I think that he needed to engage with the Mutas first, tank up with the Mutas, as weird as that sounds, so that the Hydras can actually deal with the Stalkers. And just focus fire a little bit better. But Drogo takes a great position on the high ground, and the probe positioning was perfect by him, right? Like he's not sending them to his nearly inexistent mineral line anymore. He's saying they are going to be best here in case he pushes up the ramp.
Yeah, and there's going to be a good game. Drogo takes the series 2-0. It's going to be moving on to that winner's match, face-off versus Serral.
Yeah, a very well played series by Drogo, and I actually really liked what Bly did to try to get back into that game. We talked about how Bly kind of messed up maybe in the first game by overextending and overcommitting to his attack. We saw Drogo in a very similar position in this game, and he didn't do that, right? We talked about how he did a lot of damage because he caught the lurkers off position, but that's not a given. So if you don't catch the lurkers off position there, you don't kill that natural base. You don't do the extra damage and eventually kill all the lurkers. So instead, he was doing that while switching up to the carriers, and I really like that decision by Drogo because it set him up, right?
Yeah,
it set him up no matter what.
Yeah. I really enjoyed that. And of course, I do think that I also totally agree with you. I think that the Bly made some really intelligent decisions toward the end of that game in trying to go for the base trade, recognizing that there was no way he was going to be able to contend with that army or make the defense happen versus that kind of composition. But that base trade started looking a little bit scary there, maybe giving Drogo a couple of heart palpitations.
Absolutely. And if Bly doesn't actually push up the ramp, down on the low ground, he could have actually taken that natural base, maybe the third, maybe the fourth, just look for extra damage. But maybe he didn't feel like he could ever face the army of Drogo, seeing as he had 3 carriers and maybe a Stormer to a Templar or 2.
But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for that series. So now we move on to our next couple of matches. We got a ZvZ, we got a PvZ, another PvZ. And of course, we are going to be finishing it up with that ace match after that to determine who are the 2 players who are going to be making out of the group with the winner's match and of course the decider match at the end. So ladies and gentlemen, you guys are watching WCS EU Challenger here at the Blizzard Esports Arena. We'll be back in just a little bit.
This poor town has seen its share of trials. Now we face a new